There's a place on this planet where a train could never go. Everyone agreed on that. Until recently. The Himalayas are the greatest mountain barrier on Earth. Everest rises here, along with 8 of the 10 highest peaks in the world. In just 45 miles, the terrain drops nearly 2 miles straight down. Permafrost, avalanches, seismic fault lines, and temperatures down to -40. And now China has announced, we're building a railroad through it. Not around the mountains, not over the passes, straight through, beneath the highest peaks on the planet, all the way to Kathmandu. 98.5% of the Nepali section of this line will consist of bridges and tunnels. The train will almost never see open sky. It will fly through solid mountain, mile after mile, in the dark beneath the Himalayas. But behind the staggering engineering numbers lies a story about a country caught between 2 giants, about a city that has been waiting decades for a train, and about why this railroad is not just transportation. It's a geopolitical chess match being played on the roof of the world. Stay till the end. The final chapter of this story will change everything. Nepal is one of the few countries on Earth squeezed between 2 of the world's largest powers. To the south, India. To the north, China. Both nations watch Nepal with intense interest. Historically, Nepal was almost entirely dependent on India. As a landlocked country, Nepal relied on India for oil, medicine, and basic goods. In 1989, India closed 19 of Nepal's 21 border crossings. The country was cut off from fuel and supplies overnight. In 2015, immediately after a devastating earthquake, the border was threatened with closure again. That's when Nepal started looking north, and at a railroad that could change everything. The idea of linking Nepal to Tibet by rail didn't come out of nowhere. In 1973, Nepal's King Birendra met with Chairman Mao Zedong. Mao made a promise. China would build a railway to Lhasa, with plans to extend it all the way to Kathmandu. He made that promise at a time when there wasn't a single railroad in Tibet. Half a century later, it's becoming reality. In 2006, China completed the Qinghai-Tibet Railway, the first railroad ever built on the Tibetan Plateau. More than 600 miles of track run at elevations above 13,000 feet. The air up there is so thin that the passenger cars are fitted with dedicated oxygen supply systems. In 2014, the line was extended to Shagatsi. A section to Kirong, the border town on Nepal's frontier, is currently under construction, with an expected opening around 2030. But the hardest part lies ahead. From Kirong to Kathmandu is just 45 miles. Those 45 miles represent one of the most technically demanding railroad projects in human history. The cost? $3.5 billion per mile, one of the highest per-mile construction costs ever recorded for a railroad anywhere in the world. Here is the actual engineering problem. The train departs Kirong at an elevation of roughly 13,000 feet. It needs to reach Kathmandu, sitting at 4,600 feet. Over 45 miles as the crow flies, a drop of nearly 8,500 feet. That's a grade several times steeper than any conventional train can handle. Engineers came up with something straight out of science fiction. Spiral tunnels. The train will literally corkscrew downward inside the mountain, looping in spirals to shed altitude gradually without exceeding the maximum allowable grade. Picture it. You're sitting in the train, looking out the window, and you see tunnel wall. A few minutes later, tunnel wall again. The train is moving, but there's nothing outside except mountain, and the train is slowly, in a long spiral, descending through it. The route will pass beneath Langtang National Park, one of Nepal's most pristine wilderness areas. The tunnels will emerge into the Kathmandu Valley through the Toka area. 4 stations along the way, with the terminus in Kathmandu. Kathmandu sits in a mountain valley at 4,600 feet above sea level. Mountains in every direction. Getting here is not easy. Tribhuvan International Airport, the only international airport in the country, is notorious for difficult approaches. The surrounding peaks create turbulence and severely limit the flight path options. Pilots describe landing here as one of the most demanding in the world. The roads aren't much easier. Mountain switchbacks, seasonal landslides, overloaded trucks grinding up the grades. But here's something that rarely gets mentioned. Kathmandu is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth. The valley has been settled for thousands of years. 7 sites in the Kathmandu Valley appear on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Monuments 500, 700, 1,000 years old stand side by side with modern buildings. And it's into this ancient city, nestled in its mountain bowl, that a train from China will arrive, having tunneled its way through the Himalayas. Here's the twist that turns this story into a geopolitical thriller. While China builds its line from the north, India is engineering its own from the south. The Raxaul-Kathmandu Railway, 141 kilometers, about 88 miles in length, 42 kilometers of tunnels, 124 bridges, 13 stations. Cost? Over $3 billion. 2 giants, 2 railroads, 1 Kathmandu in the middle. And here is where a pure engineering detail becomes a geopolitical statement. The Chinese railroad will use standard gauge track. The Indian railroad will use broad gauge, a difference of a few centimeters, less than an inch. The implication? Even if both railroads reach Kathmandu, trains from the north and trains from the south will not be able to run on the same tracks. Experts are direct about it. India's choice of broad gauge is a deliberate decision to ensure that Chinese trains cannot ride straight through Nepal and pull up to the Indian border. The width of a rail has become an instrument of geopolitics. The Himalayas sit on an active tectonic collision zone. Earthquakes happen here regularly. In 2015, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake leveled thousands of structures across Nepal. Preliminary assessments identify 6 extreme risk factors for the project: topography, weather, hydrology, tectonic activity, and cost. The tunnels under the Himalayas will run through a zone of constant seismic risk. Engineers are developing flexible mounting systems, so the structures can move slightly with the earth without fracturing. The ground here has a life of its own. The train will have to learn to move with it. In July of 2024, Nepal's Prime Minister officially approved the final construction plans. A feasibility study will be completed in 2026. Construction of the Nepali section will begin after that. When the train finally pulls into a station in Kathmandu, it won't just be the opening of a railroad. One of the world's most isolated capitals will no longer be isolated. Nepal gains a second connection to the world, one that doesn't run through India. China gains a direct corridor into South Asia. India gains a new competitor at its doorstep. Mao Zedong promised this train in 1973. Half a century later, it's almost here. For thousands of years, the Himalayas stood as a wall between civilizations. Now, a tunnel will pass beneath them. And the thing that separated the world for millennia will become the thing that connects it.